Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's event at the Jesus College Intellectual Forum. It's wonderful to have you with us here in this amazing Franklin Hall, or wherever you are anywhere in the world. It's wonderful to be able to reach out from the confines of this amazing college into the whole world. This is the last event of what's been a really amazing term for us here at the Intellectual Forum. We've had some utterly phenomenal events. We've had an amazing actor talk about how to use the power of your presence in a room. We've looked at anti-Kremlin protest art. We've discussed homelessness, how to take money out of politics, the role of the novel in fighting authoritarianism. And we're now going to finish with what is also going to be an absolutely amazing event. And I can say that safely because I know both of these people. I know it will be an event to remember. So let me start off with Gwen, who's going to be leading this. Gwen is many, many things. She is a Jesuit, as in she studied here, not any religious things. She is a vet. She's an innovation consultant. She is an expert on rabbit behaviour. The psychology of rabbits is literally one of the things that she has written on, and much, much more. We're not, well, I don't know what the questions are going to come to later on, but we may touch on rabbits, who knows. But we're going to talk about an amazing 18-month trip that she and Greg took together with their children. I won't say much more about that because you'll hear all about it. And it's also lovely to welcome Greg back to Jesus. Greg also has many talent, also a vet, has published an amazing book about Cambridge chapels with some of the nicest images. And when I say welcomed him back, I shouldn't really say it because he definitely didn't live in this college at any point when he was a student. That definitely did not happen, and nobody here would know anything about it. But it really is lovely to have both of you here for this evening's event. I've been hugely looking forward to it since we first got in touch. So over to the two of you.
Thanks, Julian.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Julian, and welcome everyone. Imagine if we could make a few small tweaks to how we raised a 1-year-old that would give them far better health when they're 61. Now, I'm going to introduce me and Greg, and I'm going to talk about what we did, but I want to start with a story. So 3 years ago, this was me. That's my younger daughter, who's just sitting up there right now. Thank you. And we were on our way to a baby group. But it was a pretty unusual baby group. And when we got there, first one's in, empty benches, sitting down, sweaty hands, looking at the clock. This was the view from the door. And I was at this baby group high in the Tanzanian cloud forest because I had one question that I wanted to answer. Everyone I met had beautiful posture. They looked really strong. And not just adults, but older people, children, even the babies had muscles rippling under their skin. But where was this foundation of strength coming from? So I'm sitting there on this bench, toddler in my arms, and this woman comes through the door, sunshine yellow dress, beautiful sling, baby peeking curiously over the top. And the room was filling up, so I shuffle up with the toddler, and she comes towards me. And, pause for a moment, and she turns to get her baby out of the sling. And suddenly, I see it. The missing link. And my whole worldview changed. I'm going to come back to this story a little bit later, but I want you to think for a moment, what might that mother have done that would have completely shocked me? So, my name's Gwen.
And I'm Greg. Hello.
And we are both trained vets. As Julian said, we work in health innovation. And we took our 3 children. We have one there, another one somewhere else, and the little one as well. Oh, thank you. They're all there tonight. And we took them on an adventure of a lifetime. But one of the things that we do in our jobs is we look at how bodies are healthy and how bodies fail within a Western culture. And actually, one of the hallmarks of Western industrialised cultures is that we no longer die of infectious diseases. Instead, we die of things called non-communicable diseases. Diseases that happen when the environments that we live in cause our bodies to fail in very predictable ways. But unlike most infectious diseases that typically, you get sick and either you get better or you don't, non-communicable diseases, they cause years or decades of illness requiring a lot of medical intervention before we die. And our healthcare systems were set up to deal with acute disease, not chronic disease. And this is a real problem because now about 85% of the total disease burden faced in our Western cultures is from non-communicable diseases. So 3 years ago, we took our kids on the adventure of a lifetime. We left our homes, schools, jobs to spend 18 months living in the rainforest, learning from people who live in very, very different ways to ourselves. The learning curve was certainly steep. Greg and I were learning how to catch piranhas, cut parasites out of each other's feet. And the children were learning how to make fires, run errands, and fit into 8 very different schools. And along the way, we learned a lot about what child bodies need during childhood to set them up for long-term physical health. So today, Greg and I are going to have a conversation and we're going to cover 4 main themes. We're going to talk about why bodies need certain inputs for health, why those inputs are critically important during childhood, what happens when those inputs are missing, and how we can think about putting them back. But Greg, that's the introduction. I think it's time probably for a story.
Time for a story. Right. I'm going to talk to you because talking to them makes me nervous. I'm going to talk to you. Some of them anyway. Some I'm very happy to not be nervous about. Right. This is the Barabara River. It is a tributary of the Great Rupununi that flows from south to north through Guyana, as you know. I'm talking to you here. It is treacherous and it is fast flowing and it has hidden trees and rocks. It's a pretty scary river. This fella, Patrick, who was one of the people training us to survive in the jungle, one of the people teaching us what you could and couldn't eat, and one of the people teaching us what could and couldn't eat you, would walk along it fearlessly, right along the slippery rocks and terrifying roots and horrible mud right up to the knees that made me fall over 2 or 3 times a day. I hate to break this to them, but you didn't fare too much better.
No, I did not.
Patrick was a young fella. He was, 35-ish? Mm-hmm. His older colleague, Vivian, was just as stable-footed, if not more so. He had the most flexible, responsive feet I've ever seen. He would hold things before he wanted to deal them. He'd do all sorts of things with his feet, and he never, ever fell over. Which means that what he did while he was out fishing with Gwen, when Gwen came back and told me, didn't blow my mind at all. It wasn't a proper BuzzFeed, clickbait, anything. I just went, yeah, fair point. Gwen, you went fishing with Vivian out in the Rupununi. What did he do?
So picture this, we're on this kind of little aluminium boat, trying to catch dinner. I'm a pretty novice, won't surprise you to know, not very good at catching piranhas, but I've got this kind of T-shaped piece of wood with a bit of wire around it, streaming off into the river. Vivian, he spent 63, probably, what you say, he's 65? Probably spent 63 years catching piranhas. He has 2, so he's happily fishing away with 2. One of the lines starts to go, jerks, he gives a jerk, starts to reel it in. But the other one the other one he has in his hand. So what does he do with it? He just puts it in his foot and he starts winding in this fish. And as it comes up, we can see it comes over the surface and it's a black piranha, size of a dinner plate, some of the most feared jaws in the Amazon. He pulls it in, it goes to dispatch it, and suddenly this line jerks as well. So he gives one jerk with his foot, dispatches the piranha, and then, still holding it, he starts to get his hook out. And I said, my friend, can I help? And he looks up and he goes, no, catfish, it can wait. This man, I've watched him hold fence posts between his feet while he's hammering them in. He can tell the species of fish through his toes. Mind-blowing. So Greg, what's going on here?
What's going on is Vivian's a wizard.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's going on here is that Vivian never wore shoes. He would walk around in the Amazon rainforest either barefoot or in flip-flops. And by flip-flops, I mean just your cheap 60p piece of foam rubber with a strap over the top. And that had been since he had been a very, very young child. Because of the development of his feet, which you're going to address in just a second, he had the reflex arcs well entrained and well matched by well-developed muscles, which prevented him from falling over when the movement of his ankle or foot was quicker than his brain, or my brain, would have been able to compensate. And he was much more attuned to information coming in through his feet, even though the soles of his feet were thicker than mine, quite substantially. Now, I'm going to let you explain how that happened.
Absolutely. So feet are incredibly complex, really sophisticated structures that we often actually don't spend very much time thinking about at all. But one of the really key points that our feet need to do, they need to translate the information from the floor. They need to be able to coordinate the response of our body to deal with the irregularities in the floor and allow us to compensate with movements to make sure that we don't fall over. It's a very, very specific responsibility. But one of the problems, if we stop our feet from doing that responsibility, if we immobilize those feet so they can't feel the bottom of the floor and they can't move properly to compensate, we don't actually get rid of the job. The job is still very much there. And so what ends up happening is that the more we immobilize the feet and we take the responsibilities away from the feet, the more we have to rely on other structures that just aren't as well evolved to deal with it. So if we have feet that can shape, can move, can flex, we never need to put those loads onto the knee. We don't need to put the loads onto our hip or onto our back. So it's very easy to think, you know, Vivian, he's amazing. He can feel fish through his feet. That's not really the point. What he's got is beautifully developed reflex arcs that allow him to translate the sensation into the motor function, which protects him doesn't only give him the wizard skills, but it also means that his body is protected right through his life from injury and from putting abnormal loads onto parts of his body that haven't evolved to deal with it.
Question then.
Yeah.
Would any member of our audience here, maybe some of them, maybe not, be able to do that if they just took off their shoes?
No, and this is the challenge. It takes a long time of adjustment, not only from muscle strengthening, which is clearly what we think about, from nervous function, from reflex arcs, etc. But some of these effects happen much earlier on. Is that what you're alluding to?
That's exactly what I'm alluding to. May I?
Yeah, go for it.
There are 3 systems that I reckon are worth talking about very briefly here. And the reason that Vivian not wearing shoes when he was a young child is important, and the whole point of this talk, is that the development period of the foot, the time in which it is growing, the time in which you have the neuroplasticity in the brain, although we can discuss neuroplasticity throughout life later in the talk if you'd like to, and the time in which you are developing your gait patterns and the way you respond to your feet is that sort of age. Do you have a question, little kid? What is your question? Excuse me, I'm sorry. Okay. Can we have a volunteer?
Actually, no, I'll sit on that way.
All right, fine.
It's past someone's bedtime. She was very keen to be involved. And given that she was such an active participant in this whole adventure, she's come along for the ride. Go for it.
Anyway, at around this age of this willing guinea pig right here, the feet need to be able to splay, so you have toe angle information. The feet need to be able to bend, so that you have skin pressure and reflex arc information. And the joints need to be able to move, so that they remain flexible throughout early childhood and later life. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think that's enough about feet. I think we should move on to a different example. We've talked about inputs that bodies need. Let's now think about why those inputs are particularly important during childhood.
Certainly. And no better example is there than the coconut. Very similar organism to the human, no, complete and utter lie. A mushroom on toast would be closer. Okay, This, as you can clearly see, is a germinating pile of coconuts. You see germinating piles of coconuts in many Amerindian villages throughout the Amazon, especially Makushi villages in the northern Amazon area, in Guyana, in Venezuela, little bits in Suriname, because there was, I still haven't worked out if it was a government mandate or if it was just a craze.
Oh, no, yeah.
But about 50 years ago, there was a sweeping activity of planting coconut palms. Everybody was, loving coconut. Up they went, and just before they got to fruiting height, everybody went, you know what, coconut sucks. We want nothing to do with it. So now there are these big, prime of life, heavily fruiting palms in villages, and they produce nothing other than a danger zone. There's just a dead area of about 8 feet around the trunk where nobody goes because occasionally death falls from above. And so you get these lumps of coconuts just left. Eating coconut is not part of Makushi culture. And the Makushi are a very traditional group. They live according to their culture, which was great for us, because the other thing that is part of their culture is a non-cash economy. Money has no place, which we did not know when we arrived with a little bit of cash and 5 mouths to feed. Luckily for us, another part of Makushi culture is that you feed kids at school. So the kids who were at school were well looked after, they remained nutritionally healthy, and they learnt a lot about Guyana and about living in the jungle. This one was breastfeeding, and therefore was fine. This one here and this one here, between us, lost about 25 kilos because you just can't buy food. You have to trade. And if you haven't brought... I don't think that was me.
No, that was touching that.
If you haven't brought with you sacks of stuff to trade, you have to trade skills. And what skills do I have that the Makushi don't already have? None. Or almost none.
Almost none.
Almost none.
Yeah.
You know what I can do? PowerPoint. Yeah. And you know what she can do? Excel.
Excel, yeah.
And bizarrely, each of these villages had been donated a laptop by the central government and been told to submit any further asks for money by PowerPoint, by email, which was brilliant because nobody in the village knew anything about this. I suddenly had a valuable skill. At least I thought I did. It was a valuable skill for about 5 or 6 meals. We ended up still heavily relying upon coconuts, which was an untapped food source within the village because it wasn't part of the culture. Has anybody ever tried cracking open and eating a germinating coconut? Hands? 1. 2. Oh, you, obviously. 1. Was it different from a normal coconut, sir? People online, I will relay the answer. Yes.
Very difficult. We used to put a pickaxe and pick up.
We did the exact same thing. So the way to open a coconut, if you don't have a coconut opening machine, is to sink a pickaxe into the ground and then hammer the husk onto the pointy bit and then lever it off like that. Gwen's very good at it. But once you've got inside, you've got the nut, and then you've got a game of roulette, because either inside is a delicious, slightly malting, turning all of its starches into sugars and interesting amino weirdness, delicious food, or a stinking black slime which is highly pressurized. You don't know which it's going to be from the outside. They've both got a little white shoot coming out. They both look delicious, and you crack it open like this. Because every now and again it goes, oh, it's horrible. How many of those did you open, Gwen?
I didn't open
Not
any.
a one.
But I did take the husks off.
Oh, you were very good at that.
Just not to get covered in slime.
Anyway, cracking them open gives you shards of coconut, and you eat them like that, which is easy enough for me, but quite difficult for you. Why?
So, when I was a teenager, it turned out that my teeth had not grown into my jaw in the way that they were evolved to do. So, I had a lot of orthodontic work. I had 4 teeth out, had a lot of braces, and actually, aesthetically, I think they're okay. I'm not asking for judgment or a score out of 10, but they're fairly straight. The problem, however, is that even though they look pretty straight, they don't meet in the middle. There's no point along the midline that my teeth meet. And actually the back of them are really flat. So although they look aesthetic, they don't really function in the way they're supposed to do. And that makes eating coconut really hard. Not only actually trying to get your teeth in is really hard, you can't actually bite it off. And then it's quite concave. So actually my tiny little jaw didn't really work very well.
No. But everybody else in the village had no trouble other than this traditional dislike for coconut, right? If they liked it, they could have eaten it, which is a horrible catch-22. So, may I briefly go through the physiology of what's happening here?
Yeah, go for it. Talk about teeth and scales.
Talk about teeth and scales.
That blew my mind.
Who knows the link between teeth and scales? Vets in the room? Okay, you two again. I know we got some vets in the room. Teeth and scales. Paleontologists then? Anybody? Okay. Teeth are related to scales, but how?
Teeth. They're the same structure as teeth, the dentine and...
Precisely. And this is the way I knew it as well. Shark scales and the scales of early fish are very similar, the same structure as teeth.
Be quiet.
Lucha, mate. Please be quiet, little buddy. Yeah. And I was like, oh, sharks are covered in teeth. That's the most metal thing I've ever heard. Utterly incorrect. Turns out that we have scales in our mouth. It's not that they've got teeth on their bodies, it's that we've got scales in our mouth. Back when we were early fish, I think pre-jawed, so there's a word for that, can't remember what it is, whatever, thank you. Exactly that, the jawless fish. We needed a biting surface, so we migrated some scales, or rather moved the edge of the mouth beyond the border of the scales, and then we had scales in our mouth, good hard surfaces for biting. Then we developed some of our gill arches into a jaw, and that was fantastic, and now we've got a biting thing with a biting surface, and that's great, and then we got rid of some of our scales and came up on land, but we still needed that biting surface, so we kept the scales in our mouth. Fantastic, that's what teeth are, lovely. But scales are disposable to a degree. You grow them on your surface, and if it's not good, you just knock it out and get another one. So their shape can be genetically determined. If it's not right, it doesn't need to heal and change, you just do it again. However, the bone that we use as our mandible, or the bones plural that we use as our mandible, are not scale. They are bone. Bone you cannot shed and grow a new one, so it needs a process for changing shape, for growing to suit its need. So, this is where it gets cool. Bone is piezoelectric. You know this? That the collagen fibrils within bone respond to strain by generating a small voltage, and the bone, the crystalline part of bone, is a fantastic stress concentrator. I'm not going to take your question just yet, little bud. And that leads to more strain through the collagen than you might expect, which leads to more voltage than you might expect, which stimulates the osteoblasts over the osteoclasts, depending on whether it's positive or negative end of the voltage spread. Anyway, bone, piezoelectric, that leads to stress-driven bone remodeling. Fantastic. Apart from, you've now got things that are genetically determined, set within a structure that is half genetically and half environmentally determined. As you might imagine, if you don't therefore put enough stress on the mandible and the maxilla as you are growing, you haven't got room for your teeth, which is what now happens to something like 90% of Western kids. I said this to a bunch of dentists recently in Wales, and they all went, nonsense. And then they went to the Natural History Museum and they had a look at skulls from people who'd eaten a much tougher diet, and they went, oh, they've all got 3 molars in each quadrant without problem. No failed sideways eruptions, no extractions, and they've got a nice salivary gap in between each tooth, so reducing their risk of caries because they've got a nice saliva flow between their teeth. How could that possibly have happened? There's no way that's genetic change from 5,000 years ago to now. It's too quick, and there's no driver. That is environmental change. So, what could those environmental changes have been? Would you like me to continue babbling, or would you like to take it yourself?
Oh, I'll take the first one, given you were talking about breastfeeding. Breastfeeding is a really major one, and I think it's something that people talk a lot about when we think about early childhood development, because it's what babies spend an awful lot of time doing, and we often tend to think about it more from a nutritional perspective. But the mechanical perspective is also extremely important, because I doubt many of you remember your breastfeeding experience, were you to have one, but breasts are really heavy. Actually, when you're a little small baby, bouncing your breast up and down trying to feed, this is a huge jaw workout. It puts a lot of mechanical load through. And also, within different cultures, there's a different accepted period of breastfeeding. So actually, I was really surprised when I first became a mother to find that the World Health Organization suggests that women should breastfeed for at least 2 years, with feeding beyond 2 years associated with additional benefits. That's so uncommon in the UK, but was much more common in a lot of the cultures we were in. In fact, actually, I met women who were really surprised that I was breastfeeding because they were like, oh, you know, you're white. White women don't breastfeed. And you're like, oh, actually, it's funny you should say this. This is exactly what I'm looking at. But so breastfeeding is really the really big mechanical load earlier in life. But there are other loads too. Greg, do you want to talk to some of these ones?
Certainly. Obviously, you're all thinking, okay, what's changed in the human environment in the last few thousand years? Cooking is a major one. The early weaning diet that a lot of young kids would have been weaned onto a long, long time ago would have been pre-chewed, uncooked food. Pre-chewing has been done by every single cultural group ever studied. It was done here until not even that long ago. Turns out if you give a marketing department a lot of money, they can convince everybody it's disgusting and you should definitely buy baby food. But I'm not going to go down that route. Since cooking has become ubiquitous, nearly all traditional communities now feed on pre-chewed cooked food, which is fine and completely healthy, but still much tougher than ultimately mega pureed or ultra-processed food, which is what a lot of people are weaned onto in this culture. Me, myself, being one of them, I still remember how good a rusk is. A melt-in-the-mouth rusk. Here you'll see a very small child eating the heart of a palm, sago palm, I believe, and that small child over there. And the other thing is moving on from weaning food onto childhood foods. It's not just about toughness. It's certainly not about hardness. It's very much about toughness, but it's not just about toughness. It's also about complexity and amount of time. Getting the flesh off a mango takes dedication, right? It takes time, orientation, trying different angles. It takes a lot of water afterwards to clean the child. But the foods of childhood should not be quick foods. They should be slow foods. If you want to achieve this, which is the jaw of a particular child over there. Yeah, I know it's you. I know. Don't worry. Which, as you can see, has big gaps in between the deciduous teeth to allow the permanent teeth room to erupt. That's what I wanted to add.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think, just to summarise, we talked about how certain loads, mechanical loads, we've used as an example here, really important at any point during life. But the fact that actually there are certain inputs, certain loads that have a much stronger effect in childhood, because the inputs affect function in both childhood and adulthood, but in childhood they affect growth as well, and those changes can be permanent. So it is not that there is a lot we can do in adulthood to improve health, but fundamentally, if some of those permanent changes haven't happened or have happened incorrectly during childhood, there's not really much way back. And so when we look at how jaws develop, yes, I mean, I've talked about my own teeth, I've talked about braces, and to a certain extent you can go, well, they look okay, wonky teeth, we can fix those. But what we can't fix is the underlying small jaw. And actually, as we get older, that tends to become much more of a problem, because our jaw needs to be big enough to hold not only our tongue, but the tissues within the back of our throat. So if our jaw is too small for our tongue sinks back, the soft tissues in the back of the throat then start to occlude the airway. And this results in a really common condition that in its mild form we call snoring, and in its severe form we call sleep apnea. So when you relax your face and your neck, your tongue slips back and it occludes your airway. And this is really serious because, Greg, would you like to just provide a quick demonstration? That is really stressful. If you're doing that multiple times a night, that is a huge amount of stress in your body. It causes all sorts of abnormal pressures within your thorax, within your chest cavity, puts you at much higher risk of cardiovascular disease. But actually there are some even links that are even sort of stranger and not necessarily immediately intuitive.
I'll do one, you do the other.
Yeah, go for it, yeah.
So the one that got me thinking was from breastfeeding and weaning food via mandibular undergrowth, bringing the tongue too far back, dropping into the throat, and then multiple years of sleep apnea, leading to microsleeps during the day, massively increasing your risk of a car crash if driving at night. A lot of people who crash, especially on motorways, it is because they have dropped off because they have sleep apnea or another form of sleep disturbance. And believe it or not, and I hope you do, that comes all the way back to weaning diet, breastfeeding, the hardness of childhood food. The other one?
The other one is well, I would say slightly lighter. I think it's still actually pretty dark.
It's much lighter.
Much lighter. So snoring is cited as a cause or a contributing factor on many, many divorce papers. So it has a huge, it is funny, it's funny, it's also sad, but certainly, who would have thought that what you ate when you were, 2 might affect relationship success later in life. These can have ripples down the decades.
Yeah, we have separate bedrooms.
We do actually,
Because
that's great, I would totally recommend it. Not entirely because of his snoring. Okay, should we, Greg, I think we've talked about teeth. Let's move on to a different story.
Another story. You remember I mentioned the Grand Rupununi, the river that flows from south to north through Guyana. It looks much safer at this point. It doesn't look anywhere near so lumpy. It doesn't look like there are caiman lurking everywhere. It doesn't look like there are terrifying stingrays and electric eels. There are everywhere. What's lurking in there that scared me is trees. So this is a flooded forest. The water goes up and down every year by multiple meters and multiple kilometers in both directions. Trees fall, get washed into the river, and get washed, basically so the pointy bits are pointing at you. And what scares me about that is that you can't see them. And if you fall overboard, you get caught in the branches, and the water's opaque, so you're just instantly dead, gone. And there are small children on some of these boats, wearing as bright a color as I can possibly put them in, and with a little light, waterproof light, but still scared the monkeys out of me. So when you said, oh, we should go out on a boat at night, I said, oh, yeah, okay, no, there is incredible stuff to be seen at night, especially if you've got a head torch, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you have a head torch on, the light from the head torch goes out and comes back. So you see reflections, not only the patterns on the water, but many animals have a reflective surface at the back of their eyes. So as your head torch scans across the banks of a river like this, maybe you'll see little yellow eyes of tree frogs or pink eyes of nightjars or the kind of, spider eyes. They're very cool, very sparkly. Or even eyes of snakes, tree boas, hanging from the trees, ready to catch bats. I didn't even know this was a thing. Amazing. But actually, when we went out on this boat, so it was me and my oldest daughter over there, we were out looking for caiman. And caiman, they've got big, glowing, kind of fiery eyes right at the water level. And our guide said, look, we're going to show you caiman. We're going to find the right kind. We don't want the really big ones, because you don't want to be getting close to those. You don't want the really little ones, because those little ones often have a really big mummy somewhere very close by. So we're going to look for exactly the right kind. And he briefed the guy driving the boat, because the guy wasn't very experienced on this bit of river. He talked about, how it's really important that when you see the caiman, you want to accelerate towards them, you want to drive them up the bank rather than having them come into the river where you can't catch them. So we'd had a whole kind of discussion about how to do it. And we've been looking, he's like, nope, eyes too big, eyes too small. Suddenly, Goldilocks eyes over there. So he hissed and he pointed. The driver accelerates. But he'd forgotten all the instructions he got about the stream. And so as the stream pushed the bow round, it was further and further to get to the caiman. And I heard Vivian in front of the boat, Patrick in the front of the boat, he said, more left, more left. We did actually catch the caiman, right there. But actually, while we were looking at this beautiful animal, I was distracted by something else. This was the most frustration I had heard from any adult in 3 months living in these Makushi villages. But it also wasn't just the adults. We lived in areas surrounded by babies and young children, and we never heard them cry. And that was really difficult for us because we'd just come in from Cambridge. We were in 3 hammocks. So my 2 older ones had a double-decker hammock. Me and the little one, we were sweating it out in a hammock together. I mean, he's very big, so he doesn't even fit in a hammock on his own, but he had his own hammock at least. But I can tell you, I knew that I was going to adapt, but those first weeks, every morning I'd wake up absolutely gritty with tiredness. And I would say, Greg, can you take the baby just for half an hour, just so I get half an hour of sleep? She really protested. And to my embarrassment, the village women would come and they'd bring a bowl of porridge because they couldn't understand why a baby would cry this much unless they were starving. And this happened so frequently. I'd say, Greg, the shame porridge is on its way. It was mortifying, but I wanted to understand from these mothers, what is it that you're doing? Why is my baby crying? Yours is not. So we're going to have a quick chat about what happens when the inputs that children need are missing, what we see. Greg, should we talk about frustration?
We should, but before we do, Julian, I'm not wearing a watch. How are we doing for time? Cool, thank you. All right, let's talk about frustration. Let's talk about these various pictures. There are multiple types of frustration. I'm going to ask you to go through them one by one. Do you want to address the four of them now?
Yeah, I think I'll just, before I talk about these pictures, I just want to talk about frustration itself, because frustration is the feeling of being angry or finding something difficult and having a strong emotional response to that. And psychologists talk about 4 different types of frustration that we might have to tolerate. So these frustrations are, we need to be able to tolerate physical discomfort, being too cold or too wet or too hot. Yeah, we can certainly see examples here. They talk about achievement frustration. So not being able to achieve a goal that you have, not being able to overcome the barriers to reaching a goal. They talk about emotional frustration. So the ability to deal with uncomfortable feelings, to resolve conflict, to be able to cope with those unpleasant emotions. And finally, they talk about we need to have the ability to cope with the frustration of not getting what we want. And this is actually the only one within our culture that has its own word. So entitlement is the inability to cope with the feeling of not getting what you want, of believing that you deserve to have what you want when you want it. So those are the 4 kind of frustrations that psychologists talk about. But I think it's particularly important to think about frustration as it relates to not only a child, but throughout life.
Yeah.
Greg, do you want to take that?
I do. I mean, I don't, because I don't know this anywhere nearly as well as you do, but I'll give it a shot. Pick me up where you think I've gone wrong. I think that it is important to understand that that ability to handle frustration comes from the things you have been exposed to in life. I think that it is important to understand. Can I go into the four photos here? Yeah. The 4 frustrations that Gwen has just laid out can be seen in all sorts of parts of life. So the idea of discomfort resilience, or being able to understand being able to withstand the frustration of not feeling comfortable, can just be being able to sit on a hard floor and play with toys that are going to pinch you if you get it wrong. For anybody who can't tell, that's a hermit crab, and yeah, he'd get it wrong occasionally. It can be as innocuous as showing up at a new school and not being able to do or understand or answer all of the questions that everybody else can because they've been there for longer, and you can't, and you feel stupid, and being able to withstand that is a frustration tolerance. I'll get on to what these mean to adults in just a second. The idea of, what was the third one you went through?
Was it not getting what you want immediately?
Not getting what you want immediately, yes. So up here you will see Togo sword beans. They are delicious, really, really, really tasty food, full of protein, full of carbohydrate, utterly poisonous. They will trash your kidneys and your guts unless you skin them and boil them and strain them and boil them again and then pound them and then bake them, which all in takes roughly 24 hours. So if you are hungry and you have a handful of Togo sword beans, which is a perennial bean, a truly fantastic crop, grows anywhere, grabs its own nitrogen out of the air, fantastic, awful. If you don't have the ability to withstand the frustration of not getting what you want immediately, you are at much higher risk of doing something stupid. And that last one there, shown by a small child looking at a whip scorpion. Anybody here familiar with tailless whip scorpions? Obviously you two. Well done. These are an order of group of arachnid that broke off from spiders a long time ago. They are, to my mind, the most horrifying looking animal of any animal, and I love bugs. They were in West Africa before there was a West Africa, before the Atlantic. So you find very similar groups in northern South America and West Africa, because they just got pulled apart from their relatives, and they thought, well, I'll just keep looking exactly the same for 200 million years, and they did. Anyway, knowing that they're completely harmless, I'm happy to hold them. Knowing that they look absolutely awful, my daughter wanted to run a mile, and she was torn between the emotion of, I want to look at what everybody else is looking at, and the emotion of, oh God, what is that? And being able to withstand that frustration of my emotions telling me two different things at the same time. Another valuable frustration to learn to deal with. So, growing up is when you set your frustration tolerances. It's when mother cats will bring more and more and more uninjured prey to their kittens, right? The idea being to frustrate them, to teach them not just to kill stuff, cats, but also to withstand the idea that food is going to run away. You won't always get it. It's hard work. It might bite you. You'll be cross with me. You'll be cross with it. You'll be cross with the whole world. Learning to withstand frustration is a thing that mammals do early in life. I'm laboring a point. I apologize. It must be frustrating. What is an adult like if they haven't learned frustration tolerance early in life? Gwen?
So it's very easy to think about the social aspects of a person who is easily frustratable, because it's easy to think, we might think about friends we've had who are difficult to relate to, or who perhaps are shorter term friends because we're not able to get past emotional challenges. There might be people who we think of as difficult colleagues. It might be, even people who we think of as, in our own experiences, as angry or irritable parents. There are many social aspects of frustration, but where it really relates to this talk is actually within our culture. It's very easy to lead a very easy life, but a very easy life is not a healthy life. And actually, in order to set up those behaviours that set us up for longer term health, we need to be able to cope with frustration, eating well, moving. All of these things, they take more effort. They are intrinsically harder work. So part of setting up kids to be able to deal with frustration also helps set them up for better decision making around health right through their lives. But I think the piece that I really want to pick up here is to go back to that story about frustration that I've just told. Because I think, again, within how we typically, within Western cultures, see things, we often think, well, if we're wanting to achieve something, more is better. But what we learned in these cultures, and what the evidence really backs up, is that more is definitely not always better. What you really want is you want a babyhood where all the needs are met, where you have really, really responsive parenting, so the child isn't practicing frustration. You then want to have adults who don't model frustration, because then the child has got no one to copy. But you want the frustrating elements to come not from the adults within a child's life, but from the environment. Because when frustration comes from the environment, the child cannot affect it. There is no amount of whining that makes the rain stop. There's no number of tantrums that put a fish on your line. When the environment is the source of frustration, the ability to learn that frustration tolerance is much easier. And one of the real challenges within our society is that we don't allow kids to feel frustration, because we protect them, we shield them, we take away boredom, we alleviate discomfort very, very quickly. But also, because they don't have time to play in an unstructured way, unsupervised, in wild environments, they never get to feel the frustration of an environment. So the frustrations that they do feel are towards adults, and that is a totally different situation.
Yeah, there's a line between anger and frustration.
There is a line between anger and frustration. And now this bit, I think we're a little bit of a dip in the talk, right? Probably, certainly when I was learning about frustration tolerance, I thought, oh my goodness, I think I fulfill all of the criteria for all of these different types of frustration intolerance. It's very easy to kind of see things that resonate with ourselves and with our lived experience. But I think we should move on to the last bit of our talk, the more hopeful bit. what can we do? How can we think about putting inputs back? And I'm going to go back to this story. So you remember, I was in this room, this woman had come in, she turned to take her baby out of his sling. And she did something that really shocked me. And I asked you, what do you think she did? She reached round, baby put his arm up, she took him by the arm, and she lifted him out by his arm. Now, any of you who's ever owned a baby, or even seen a baby, will know that picking babies up by their arm is absolutely taboo in our culture. Because we've got loads of research papers that say if you pick a child up by the arm, you dislocate their elbow, you tear their ligaments, you can cause permanent damage. But this is within our Western cultural context, because actually, if you take a newborn baby, we were told this at vet school, and we tried it, it does indeed work. You can hang a newborn baby on a washing line. Their grip strength is strong enough, their connective tissue is strong enough to bear the loads through their arms. And if we take that baby and instead of protecting them, we actually start picking them up gently, gently by the arms, those tissues, that collagen, that strengthens. So actually, within the cultures that we were living in, especially in many African cultures, this is really common, and elbow dislocation is not common. But what you do get is you get the benefits. And what are the benefits? Well, in order for us to develop backs and shoulders and arms that work, we need to have the ability to control those movements. And so when babies are picked up by the arms, they not only learn how to protect their joints a bit, they learn how to develop the strength and brace themselves in a comfortable position. They learn how to control their chest on their arms. Those additional loads put changes through their diaphragm. It changes how almost the whole upper body girdle works. So actually, boxers, there was a fashion recently where boxers would train for their upper body strength by hanging and doing deep breathing because it completely changes the loads on this area of the body. But there's a laddering effect. So if you have children who have strong, well-controlled upper bodies, the movements that they can do as they start to move and walk and climb are more and more complex. And so you end up setting bodies up that look physically very, very different in adulthood. It's certainly, returning to the UK, the difference in upper body shape is really, really marked. Now, I'm not saying that we should all be picking up babies by the arms. That is absolutely never going to fly in our culture, nor should it be advised. But my point is this. When we recognise the load that is missing, we can think about ways to put it back. And there are loads of ways once we realise what to do. This is what kids do, toddlers do, if there are creepers, if there are low branches on trees. Unfortunately, in the UK, we typically cut those off just in case a child might fall off them. So that's not always an option. But we have monkey bars, fantastic, all sorts of outdoor toys that children can hang and swing off. And also, if you want to do something nutty, put up some monkey bars in your house and you can have a whole system where children can develop those skills. But the thing is that this sort of movement, as we can see in that toddler in the top, is really, really pleasurable. Children love to do it. The reason they don't is because we don't realise that it's something that should be in their environment that's missing. And that's why looking outside of our Western culture can deliver so much.
I think that we should point out at this point that is not just a specific. It's not just a specific thing that a little bit of increased stress and difficulty in being lifted leads to long-term better musculoskeletal upper body health. It is quite a generalized thing that you see all over the literature if you look. That a little bit of controlled stress in early life sets bodies and minds, but we're talking mostly about bodies here, up for better long-term health in general. So, this.
Yeah, so one of the things that we have done since being back, because we can't possibly, even in this talk, I can't possibly cover all of the different solutions to all the loads that are missing within childhood. So one of the things we've done since we've been back, we have a podcast, we have articles where we look at specific missing loads and look at what we can learn from other cultures, what we can bring back, how we can think about putting some of those loads back at different parts of childhood. Because There is so much emerging literature on this, and typically parenting talks about how you set kids up for good emotional health, or and good kind of achievement, development, mental development. But physical development is something that I think we've really undervalued in the past, and it's starting to become more and more crucial as we have healthcare systems that are struggling, as we have increasing rates of non-communicable disease. But there is so much we can do, and that's what is really exciting here.
On the way here, I was trying to think of some generalizable things we could hand out. I didn't memorize them because I was too late. Do you mind if I read them?
No, go for it.
I'm sorry, I'm aware this is unprofessional, but I'm not a professional, so... All right, trying to look over the various articles that you've written and the various podcasts we've done together, it looked to me like there were two general things that are important. One of them is to be very aware and perhaps beware of our cultural risk aversion, right? Especially our lack of understanding culturally that short-term risk often has long-term won-over risk, right? So the specific thing to be aware of there is, no, I'm not going into specifics. Generally, be very aware that the risk you are avoiding now may have had a long-term benefit. I'm not saying just take every risk you can find. What I'm saying is, if you are trying to avoid a risk, just pause for a second and go, am I throwing a baby out with the bathwater? Am I missing something good because I'm doing this safer thing? If so, is it worth doing? And the answer may well be yes, and you may not change your behavior at all, but you've taken a second to think about it, and you're less likely to miss out on good things. Chopping lower branches off trees is a good example of that. You are preventing 1 in 100 chance of a child falling out of that tree and breaking their arm, but you are causing a 2 in 3 chance of any local child not having access to an upper body workout and therefore lasting better adult health. The other generalized thing I thought was important was, beware comfort. So this kind of comes back into the risk thing a little bit. It is a short-term versus long-term thing. Comfort very often means that you do not have to do anything to be happy where you are. That means you are missing out on some form of stimulus, workout, learning activity, something. Be it incredibly comfortable shoes, which means your feet don't have to flex to find a comfortable position so you don't get such strong, tough feet. Okay, no biggie. Okay, it kind of is because comfortable shoes refer low frequency shock up to your knee and slowly knack your cartilage. A specific example of the general learning, if something is mega comfortable, just be slightly wary of it. There we go, a generalized learning. And it might be completely fine. Just have a think. There we go, that's all I wanted to add. I'm sorry.
No, great, thank you.
Threw us off there.
Right, then finally, one thing people always ask is, what is it, you were away for 18 months. What have you changed? Like, what did you come back and think, oh, I'm going to do that differently? So, just 3 little ones. Firstly, that's not the children, other ones. Firstly, when we got back, it was amazing how empty villages were. How many people in our village at home?
2,000-ish.
Yeah, in the villages we were living in?
Oh, 200.
Yeah, and how many people do we see?
Well, if you walk through an Amazonian village with 200 people, you see 200 people because everybody's outside all the time, and even if they're inside, they haven't got any walls, so you just see straight through the house. Whereas at home, sure, it's colder, so a lot of people spend a lot of time indoors, but it goes beyond that. People don't come out, not unless they've got a little furry 4-legged excuse. Walk through our village at home, you see 2 or 3 people, and they've all got a dog. It's weird. It was spooky coming home.
I felt like coming back to a ghost town. So what we did was we made a commitment to eat outside as much as possible in the summer. It's not our garden, this is just a bit of communal green space, and we sit out there, we have our lunch, and we wave to our neighbours, and we have so many more conversations this way than we did before, and that is lovely. Secondly, 18 months spent cooking over open fires. Sounds really risky, but then what you realise is actually when you've got a kid cooking over an open fire, you don't want them to fall into the fire, sure. But they haven't got that terrifying risk of pouring a pan of scalding water over them, which is a life-limiting injury. When you're cooking on the floor, the worst that can happen is you can burn your feet. And so actually when we got back, we thought, our kids have done loads of cooking while we're away. We're going to get a little second-hand induction hob. We're going to put it on the floor, and we're going to give them pretty much free range. And we've had all sorts of unusual dishes, but
Do you know what we had today?
What did you have today?
Scrambled eggs with cinnamon.
Scrambled eggs with cinnamon, yeah. The spice experiments are quite unusual. But they cook 2 meals a week for us, which is fantastic. Enabled by an induction hob, 20 quid induction hob on the floor. And finally, when we got back, we'd spent so long living in hammocks and living in tiny, tiny rooms, as the 5 of us. We realised that actually, we got back to our 2-bedroom house, and it was a palace. It was absolutely enormous. We could have a room each. We were out, including the bathroom, one in the bathroom. But actually, within our culture, we typically think, right, 3 kids, we need a bedroom each, we need a bigger house. But having spent a long time away, we thought, no, we don't want to be spending more money and making a house bigger. Actually, what we want to do is have a space where the children can be outside, be on their own. And so we bought an old horse field, and we're in the process of, various charities coming in, putting ponds in, putting hedges in, and our kids and local kids can go there and have some time in an unsupervised natural space, which is something that is so, so difficult for kids to have access to nowadays.
To be clear, before anybody mistakes me for being loaded, this was less than the money we'd been saving up slowly to try and get a big enough house. Big enough house. Turns out big enough house was utterly pointless, and outdoor space was much, much more valuable. That's it.
Yeah, that's us done.
Thank you. I promised you a fascinating evening, an exciting evening. I hope you'll agree that they have absolutely delivered. We do have time for some questions about almost any of the things that were raised here. And if we can just wait for one of the microphones to come in. There's one over there to start with.
Fabulous talk and great storytelling.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Masterpiece of that. Silly question, is your footwear tonight an accident?
Very much no. Do you want to take this one or shall I?
No, you go for it.
So we talked about the importance of non-constricting, flexible, and non-tilted. We didn't mention non-tilted, but non-tilted is important. Footwear in childhood. To set up the body correctly so that it is more likely to be locomotorily healthy throughout life. It is less important, but still very important, to continue that in adulthood. 3 major points being, don't mash your toes together, because it's very bad for them, and you're more likely to get bunions and stuff, but also, having your toes apart gives you much better understanding of where the ground is and where you are, and you're less likely to turn an ankle or fall over, and I don't like doing those things. Also, not having a heel raise means that, demonstrate here, not having a heel raise means that my calves rest in a longer position, which means I'm not referring as much stress up to my lower back, which means I'm not pulling my back out like that, which means I'm less likely to suffer from back pain in later life. And that also has effects on the knee and hip as well. And having a very thin sole means we're talked about referring of low pressure waves up through the joints. Who knows about the 4 mechanoreceptors in the skin? Come on. Pacinian corpuscles, Merkel's discs, Meissner thingies. Whatever. There are high and low frequency receptors in the skin. The high frequency ones are much faster acting in some cases, and they are very, very common in the soles of the feet. They are your damage prevention system. If you get high frequency input, like a slap through the sole of your foot, you instantly, reflexively soften your other joints. It prevents damage. That damage, however, isn't coming from the high frequency, low amplitude wave. It's coming from the high amplitude, low frequency wave which accompanies it. If you wear softer soles, you lose that high frequency thing. Your feet go, oh, this is brilliant. Lovely squidgy ground, brilliant. No damage here, nice straight-legged, efficient walking posture. I can go for miles. What it's blind to is the low frequency waves coming up, which if you have sedentary cartilage like me, because I don't walk all day, which I should, but I don't. If you have slightly weak sedentary cartilage like me, those low-frequency waves can cause it to split, leading eventually to osteoarthritis, which I don't want. So I keep my feet damage-aware, thin sole. I keep my toes splayed out, better balance, more movement, less bunions and pain. And I drop the heel because I don't want my back to hurt when I'm an old man, which I am, but when I'm an older man.
Fantastic. If you're online, please do put questions using the Q&A feature. We'll go right to the back here.
First of all, it's a pleasure to know about all your experiences. Once again, I have a question. I'm not really sure if this is very relevant, but I'm just curious to know, do you think the family tree will in any way, good or bad, affect a child's life in jungle? So what I'm trying to say is that imagine a kid whose parents, whose grandparents, whose great-grandparents have been living in cities and urban areas. Do you think that taking that kid into nature in the wilderness will have any good or bad effect growing up? So,
I'll take this. Go for it.
Yeah, so a really great question. I think what I'm understanding is how long, if you have a long period where you've grown up outside of that environment, how much benefit do you get from going back? Is that roughly what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there are many levels that I could answer this on. There's the kind of there's a very simple one, which is in natural environments tend to promote more varied movement. They provide microorganisms in the air, which is good for our microbiome, gut and respiratory. They provide a whole load of different inputs that you do not get in very urban environments. So in general, diversity of experience is good. So actually just doing something different is a real bonus.
I'm going to catch you here slightly. Can I just check? You were talking about multi-generational effects, right?
Okay.
So epigenetic effects and potentially degradation of microbiome down the levels?
Yeah, go for it.
Are you sure?
Yeah, go for it.
Having a man talk about the disgustingness of birth, maybe.
Go for it.
All right. So there are epigenetic effects. I don't know very much about them. You would want to read papers or ask me to do that for you. I haven't done it. Do you know any of them?
So you do have, for example, height seems to increase in urban environments outside of nutrition. There's some really interesting stuff about actually how being in more crowded environments changes certain aspects of our biology. I can't remember I've read a few papers, can't remember all the details there. But so there are certain aspects like that which are epigenetically driven. In terms of like loss of biodiversity in the human, that is another kind of area of really big research. You want to speak to?
Yeah, might as well.
Biodiversity
so the more diverse your microbiome, both on the skin, in the lung, in the gut.
More in the guts.
No, you're absolutely right. Sorry. Biodiverse skin microbiome has been linked with various disease processes, and a more healthy situation probably is less biodiversity. But in the gut, you want more biodiversity for better digestion, better health, and better psychology. But that biodiversity comes from your environment and from your parents, because birth is disgusting and you get a lot of fecal bacteria and everything all over you and in your eyes and in your mouth when you're born. But as people go through successive generations in a very clean, and Cambridge may not feel it, but it is very clean compared to the wild environment. As you go through successive generations, you're losing that biodiversity. And the amount you get from your mother at birth won't rescue you if the amount she got from her mother at birth was reduced. If the amount that she got from her mother is reduced, you are losing a fraction with every step. And our environment is no longer enough to top that back up.
There are some fascinating questions and comments online. I might do one of these and then I'll come over here. So I'm not going to tell you all the nice ones. You know, there's
Just the hard ones.
Nikki Holdstock says, absolutely amazing talk. Through your travels and experience, can you do a regular presentation on this format? So I think that's the podcast.
There is a podcast.
But can I just bring the question from Jacqueline Ramji, who says, so many children these days have allergies, especially nut allergies. What evidence from the communities you lived in had about whether allergies were a significant factor there?
Really great question. So I'm going to take that one. So nut allergies are a really interesting example because actually the recent public health guidance to introduce allergens earlier has actually meant that nut allergies are in decline, which is really, really great news. A lovely example of how exposing children to allergens earlier, as they have been in many other cultures with lower allergy rates, can help to reverse a general trend of allergy. But in general, if we take a step back on allergies more broadly, what I would say from the cultures that we lived in, there were certain areas in urban environments, allergies are definitely going up a lot. In some of the more rural environments, we saw practices which we know that if you did those in a Western context, for example, using a lot of antibacterial soap to clean your babies twice a day, we know that that would be increasing your rates of allergy. But actually, in some of these communities, we weren't seeing those changes at this point. Maybe that is because the environment itself is much more microbially diverse, which is offsetting some of those. Maybe some of it is that actually parents have a richer microbiome as well, so you don't already have that kind of successive microbiome loss. But certainly in many areas in sub-Saharan Africa, and especially in South America, in more urban environments, you are certainly seeing increases in allergies.
Do you think it would be fair to add that mouth-to-mouth feeding or mouth-to-hand-to-mouth feeding of very antigenic food is a likely protectant against later allergy?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there are certain practices, also spoon sharing, all of those ones where you're having transfer of the oral microbiome and antigens in early life are protective against allergies. Even hand washing dishes rather than using a dishwasher associated with lower rates of allergy in children. Some great studies out there.
There's a question at the front there.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
At the beginning, you mentioned that you were picking things out of each other's feet. So, clearly there must have been some medical challenges at times. What were the local medicines that you were using, and how did the kids cope when they didn't have Calpol, or how did you cope when you didn't have that?
I'm going to hand that one to you.
I'm happy to take it. So I think the major local medicines that we made use of were all local knowledge rather than local ingredients. Nearly all of the villages we stayed in had a centrally funded and stocked health post. They had packets of antibiotics. They may have been out of date. They may have been 100 hours away from the local pharmacist, but they were there. And in some cases, they were used utterly inappropriately. But reading papers about the prevalence of liver and kidney damage caused by inappropriate antibiotic use in Western Africa is disheartening. Anyway, if people have pain, they understand that there are analgesics available at health posts that you can take. They also understand that there are natural medicines that their parents will have taken that you can take. And there's a certain equivalence understood between those things. I didn't take us down those routes, and you didn't take us down those routes. No. But the understanding of, if this has happened to you, you need to do this, for local specific threats such as these stings, this type of food poisoning, this type of injury, was invaluable. Do you want to know more about the parasites, because they're awful? The Chigo flea, often misnamed as a chigger, which normally would be Trombicular autumnalis, the harvest mite, but it's not that.
Veterinary training was super useful, I have to say, being out there.
Super useful.
My goodness.
Trimming hooves, very, very useful when it comes to Chigo fleas, which are both the smallest and largest adult flea of any flea. They're the smallest adult flea when they bite their way into you and start sucking on your skin fluid outside of your basement membrane, therefore avoiding immunological attack, but also avoiding being brushed off because they're within your skin. While they're there, they feed and they grow and they swell into a distended, bloated awfulness with one end of a flea at one end and one end of a flea at the other, and this big white mass of eggs in the middle. And they start chucking out eggs out of the hole that they've just burrowed into your foot. So you become a walking flea factory. Luckily, none of ours didn't get that far, because you can feel something's wrong. And you look down and there's a lump and you go, Gwen, what the hell is this? And she goes, oh, I've just read about these. And then you get a knife and you cut a little X on the top of it and you apply pressure and out pops this, and then you burn it. But at the beginning, it was a screaming procedure for the kids. Not because it was necessarily very painful. You're not going through the basement membrane. It's just that having your parent hold a big bloody knife to your foot. It's quite a scary thing. By the end, they would bring us the big bloody knife and go, I think I've got a flea, would you mind? And it's just that mind shift from knife equals cutting food equals danger to knife equals tool equals relief from pain. I hope I've answered your question.
There's a question up there.
No.
Hi. I've got two questions, if I may. So this does
They're
sound
brief.
like brief. Sounds like the adventure of a lifetime. I just wonder, how did this come to be? Like, how did you plan for such a trip and in so many different places? And the other question is, maybe it's a bit personal, but some people will relate to this. I have a 1-year-old, and I had this idea of, if you chew hard foods, it's good for development of the of the mouth. But she just refuses hard foods, and she will say duro, which is in Spanish hard, and she will just spit it out. Mm-hmm. So I'm like giving her soft foods, Have you got any advice for that, and for the sorts of foods that are available in the UK to make like gradual increments in hardness?
I suggest you come and talk to me afterwards.
Okay.
I'll give you that
so,
question very briefly. What was the answer?
Can I do the first
do
question? The first question, very briefly, was that we planned meticulously for 2.5 years, writing to the leaders of distant villages within the Amazon is not easy because you have to write to the first village downstream that has access to the internet and ask them to send a letter upstream, to ask them to send a letter upstream, to ask them to relay it takes a very long time. But it turned out to be doable and a lot easier with children, because if you say to a village in the Amazon, do you mind if these 2 white people show up? But they go, missionaries, no. Not having any more missionaries, thanks, we've had enough missionaries. If you say, do you mind if these 2 white people and their 3 adorable children come, they go, oh, weirdos, perfect. And they say, please, hang your hammocks just here. The school's over there, show us your adorable children. They were like a village passport, it was incredible. And as soon as you show up and say, look, we're not going to cause any trouble, we just want somebody to sling our hammocks and we'd love to talk to people, we're not going to tell you anything, we just want to listen. People are a lot more willing to accept that you're not there to damage anything.
There are more questions than we might get to. We'll take the one right at the back first.
And we will also be here for a little bit afterwards if you'd like.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it, and it takes me way back to growing up. I grew up in Cameroon, West Africa, and in the village of Fo Indu. So I come from the people of Fo. And I was wondering if for nearly 2 years in Tanzania, whether you were able to speak to elders from like 80, 90 upward, and what did you learn from them? And in this particular moment, I'm holding my great uncle who is 114 and is walking. I'll show you his photos later. And I was thinking of the stories that I'm now recording by talking with him, because I've been living in Cambridge since 2007, and asking him, how did he get to not fall off and not use anything, but just wanted to.
Do you remember Martin?
Yes, I remember Martin.
He's probably the best person to talk about here. So this story doesn't come from Tanzania. We did meet some fantastic elders in Tanzania. I speak a little Swahili, Gwen speaks a little Swahili, and enough to laugh at jokes, which as soon as you start laughing at somebody's jokes, they'll tell you anything. It's great. But we met a man called Martin in the Amazon rainforest, who was 85-ish, and he was a master of various things. He was a hunter. He would fight with wild animals. He would weave the village matapi. Familiar with matapis? Anybody? You should be. Matapis are wicked. Bitter cassava is phenomenally poisonous. If you just eat it, it'll kill you. If you cook it and eat it, it'll kill you. If you wash it and cook it and eat it, it'll kill you. What you have to do is grate it and wash it and throw the water away, and then collect all the fish from the river that you've just poisoned and then eat them. And then wash it again and throw the water away and collect the one fish that dies this time. And then you take the grated washed cassava and you pack it into a matapi, which is like a finger trap. You know, the ones that get narrower as they get longer? But it's 8 feet and 6 feet long. And then you hang a 20-kilo weight on the end, and it presses the water out of this thing. To fold palm fronds into a matapi capable of being used for decades, you need to be incredibly strong. Martin, at 85, had hands significantly stronger than mine. He was also a better communicator, to be fair. He was a fantastic listener. His eyesight was just starting to fade at 85.
His nails.
His nails were incredible.
So I've never seen, because he did so much weaving, I kind of had assumed that these are like really human nails, but actually if you use your nails for things, your nails look very different. So his thumbnails were like claws. They were so thick because that was what he was using to do that. And I was like, oh my goodness.
They were like Hollywood props, but
they were just incredible. Yeah, his body, it was amazing.
And there was no sign that he was falling apart with age, which is what will happen probably to me and definitely to a lot of us here as we approach 85. We talked to him about the way he grew up, and he was in that village before watches and clocks. He grew up meeting people, and they'd say, "Oh, I'll meet you when this particular species of cicada wake up," because that particular species of cicada wake up when the light is at a particular intensity, and they're near the equator, so that's the same time every day. So it's a reliable way of telling the time. I'm off on a track here. What I'm trying to say is, yes, we spoke to some incredible elders who were more physically capable than I think I have any hope of being at that age. And it was that physical capability that led us to thinking it was so important to be set up correctly.
We're beginning to run out of time. I'm going to try and fit in just a couple of quick questions and one online. So there's one at the front here, and then there'll be one there.
Can I ask one thing? If anyone has a question for the children, they really would love to answer a question.
Okay, we'll have to have very quick questions and slightly quick answers to try to get some in. But
just quickly, I was interested in kind of what you kind of saw about communicable disease within the communities you visited, kind of what life expectancy kind of was, what people died of, without kind of Western medicine that we're used to.
Life expectancy is a red herring.
So I think there is a lot of the factor that skews life expectancy is early childhood mortality, and that certainly is a serious problem. In a lot of the places we were in, vaccines were common, which was good. There was, in general, most of the places had pretty good healthcare. Diseases, TB, I mean, we can talk about this in a lot of detail. Probably best to cover it later. But yes, certainly we saw quite a lot of infectious disease.
We did.
Yeah.
But yeah, beware of life expectancy. Places with life expectancy of 47 doesn't mean that most people who get to 50 won't live to be 100.
Yeah.
question right at the top. So with the...
I was just going to yell, "Hi kids, well done for lasting so long. You've got a great mum and dad. They are so exciting and interesting." So here's a really broad question for you guys. Hopefully you'll all give a slightly different answer. What was the best thing about your trip?
Okay, quick answers.
I don't know.
Oh, Marty has one.
Marty? Playing with hermit crabs.
Playing with hermit crabs.
Nice short-term memory.
Great.
And?
Lutra, what was the best thing about travelling? Oh. Was it fruit?
Was it the mangoes?
Mango.
Perfect.
And then we'll just take the question over there.
I have a question which is about, I've been hearing you talk about physicality and the body and people using their bodies, and maybe a question for the children, maybe a question for you, is what did you notice the difference about how people use their minds where you were?
Good question.
Great question.
Other than the frustration thing, there was certainly a...
Oh, I think this is not quite the same, but in a lot of places we lived in, there was a bit of a taboo about telling anyone what to do, about projecting your framework and your belief onto somebody else. So actually what that meant was there was a lot of modelling and a lot of inclusion, but not instruction. And I think that actually has a very big, when you start to say, I don't want to tell people what to do, fundamentally changes how you see your role within a community. And so I think that's probably the example that I would pick there.
The thing I would add to that is that children don't play games, they model adults. So there was a lot of, we're not going to play Dragons and Knights, we're going to play cooking a meal, or we're going to play going hunting. They would do adult things, but smaller. We concentrate on the physical, I'm sorry.
I think we're going to stop there. There are more things coming in online. There's more questions I know in the room. But Gwen, Greg, that has been absolutely, utterly amazing and a great way to finish off the year. So.
Thank you.